How's it going, YouTubers? So I got an interesting video today which came from a subscriber's recommendation, and it's something I haven't really mentioned or talked about before, and I'll put up what he said now. But really what he's looking for is buying used welders, some tips and tricks dealing with buying one and basically not getting screwed over, I think is really what he's looking for, because hey, I totally hear that. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and I'll give you all sorts of ideas on what to look for and tips. So let's get into it. So to start things off, I'm going to talk about why you might want to buy a used welder. And well, I think we all know the answer is because we're all cheap bastards and we want a deal. But no, realistically, welders are expensive as hell. I mean, they are. There's no way getting around it. And if you can save some money and still get a quality product, why wouldn't you? Especially because, you know, none of us are really on unlimited budgets. I mean, that's why we bought welders and fixed stuff ourselves, is so that we can kind of control our expenses, and it's an awesome, fun hobby. But buying a used welder can save you a bundle of money. A great example would be this Dynasty 210 here. This sucker sells for somewhere around $5,000–6,000 right now, which is pretty asininely stupid if you ask me, and I'm the idiot that paid that. But if you could buy one of these used, you could save probably $2,000 to $3,000. That's no joke. So that is a viable option. Same thing like with these two. I mean, this guy sells for somewhere between $500 and $650 now, and then this little guy generally somewhere around $1,500. So again, if you could buy it for half that, awesome. But well, with everything like used cars and used airplanes, you got to be pretty careful about what you buy, because you know you could get the previous person's problems. So the best advice I can give you on how to buy something and not get screwed over are going to be the following tips. So tip number one, and these aren't in any particular order, so please listen to them all, because some important ones will probably be in the middle of them, and I'm just going to run through numbers until I run out of ideas, if that makes sense. So tip number one is, if you want a particular welder, like say you want this Dynasty, look up the reliability on Google or something. So search something simple like, is the Dynasty 210 reliable? You're going to find a lot of probably mad people that say it's not, and I can attest that has been far less reliable than these two machines. So yes, there are reliability problems with those. So anything you search, someone somewhere has probably had it fail and is upset about it. And people who have things fail on them are far more vocal than ones who have things that work. So that's always something you have to keep in perspective. Okay, like if you search for do Toyota Camrys have problems? Someone out there has had a problem with theirs and probably lemon lawed it. But how many were sold and how many people are happy with them? So you got to put it in perspective. But there are welders out there that are known to have serious reliability issues. Those you would want to stay away from. And I hate to say it, but there's some Lincolns and some Millers that are pretty well known to fail and leave you high and dry and very expensive to fix. So that's all things you have to consider there. So do your due diligence. Tip number two, it wouldn't hurt to open up like a MIG welder and look inside of it. If you look here now, I haven't cleaned this in, I don't know, a couple weeks, and I haven't been burning that much wire, but you can see there's a fair amount of filth in there, but it's not too bad. If you open the sucker up and it has 2 to 3, 5 times the amount of dust in it than you see in here, you know two things right away. One, they don't clean it. And two, it's been used a lot. Now, a used welder, obviously, if you could buy one with 1 hour on it, it's probably going to last longer than one with 500 hours. So it's something to consider in that respect, that it's in your best interest to buy one that was used very little. Also, if someone says, oh, this thing only has 2 hours on it and it's completely filthy, you know that they're a lying sack of something. So keep that in mind. For tip number three, physically look at the welder. So not just in pictures, if you look at them on Marketplace, but in person, look at it. If you see any significant dents to the case, you probably shouldn't buy it. These welders, especially the modern ones, are built to where there's very little clearance between the side panels and the circuitry. So if you have a 1-2 inch dent pounded in the side, odds of it shorting out in the future or causing damage to one of the boards, or the fact that maybe it was dropped and one of the boards, you know, is going to fail, pretty high. So physical damage to me is for the most part an instant no-go. I'm not going to buy it. Now, if it's an old Ideal Art 250, you know, the real man's tombstone, one of those, honestly, if it's got a couple dents in it, who cares? It's probably got 8 inches of clearance from the front and side panels to anything. That's not going to really matter, and those things sat around for, you know, the last 70 years. So it's going to pick up a dent or two. But modern stuff like this, don't waste your money on it if it's got a dent. So for number 4, let's talk about ground clamps. I don't know what it is, but when you find someone who probably doesn't have a whole lot of skill welding, you'll find their ground clamp is like completely like welded and arced and everything, like it's just almost falling apart. So if you see the person's ground clamp and it just looks terrible, again, they probably didn't take care of the welder. They probably didn't know what they're doing, and it's probably been beat pretty good. And maybe that's because they like clamp to what they're welding on right by it, but if they had any knowledge, their clamp wouldn't need to be in that bad a shape. Like, I mean, even this thing, you can see it arced off on something and kind of melted that, but if the whole thing looks like that, that's kind of a warning sign that you probably shouldn't buy it. Because again, if the thing's been beat up and it fails on you, well, you might have saved half, but now you save 0 because you have to get a new welder or pay for it to be fixed. And to get it fixed, well, your savings disappeared, I guess. For number 5 is age. And I don't mean you, but the age of the machine. These things are pretty new, okay? All 3 of these welders are within, I don't know, 2-3 years of manufacture date. When you get into some of like older inverters from say like the 90s, the probability that they're going to have an issue much higher. I mean, it goes without saying, like old electronics, like an old computer, how long is it going to last? Probably not a whole lot longer than a couple years, right? Same thing with welders. So if the machine is pretty old, you probably don't want to waste your money. Now, that is a caveat to that, I guess, is if it's an older transformer machine like a Lincoln Tombstone or an Ideal Art 250, Miller Thunderbolt, Miller Dial Art 250, those kind of machines are the MIG equivalent, so big old MIG welders and stuff. They have very, very few parts that can fail. So those things, even though they might be 30, 40 years old, are still good to go because, well, nothing can fail in them. And if it does fail, they're generally pretty easy to fix. And those old school welders tend to be pretty cheap, which is a benefit to you. The only downside to them, so they don't have nice, easy to adjust screens generally. They're not as accurate for the set points. And probably the 2 biggest reasons why I don't really like the old school machines too much is that physically they tend to be huge. Like an old 250, 300 amp stick welder might be as big as this whole damn toolbox that these are sitting on, or all 3 of these combined, just for a 250 amp stick welder. Like, that's pretty ridiculous. So the size of them is massive. They're not portable. And then the other issue that kind of comes with that is they're so power hungry, it's unbelievable. I can get 210 amps out of this machine on stick and probably, I don't know, at least 180 amps on a 30 amp circuit, okay? An old Lincoln Tombstone, 180 amps, you're gonna need like 40, 45 amps of draw to output that. So those old school machines are highly inefficient. And if you're on limited electrical service or heaven forbid a generator like I run, you're screwed. Like those things, your generator is going to cough up blood after a few minutes of running on one of those. So something to think of in that regard. But, you know, they're not, the old big units aren't bad, but, you know, keep that in mind. For number 6, kind of the obvious, turn it on, play with it a little bit. Make sure that, like, press this button, stuff happens there. Same thing over here. Take a look at where the settings are, make sure that the dial adjusts properly. If you're looking at, like, I don't know, a Hobart Handler 140 where you don't have a digital display, obviously this isn't relevant, but most welders now very commonly have displays. Make sure everything works in that regard. Very easy test to do. And even though it's not really of that thought, check the power cord and the cables while you're up here and make sure that they don't have cuts in it or any other problem, because, well, it might still work, but then you have to do repairs to that, and that's just added cost, which, again, the whole purpose of buying used is to save money. And if you got to put money in it to make it work, then where's your savings? So another pretty obvious one is that you kind of got to test that it works. I mean, I've never bought a welder that I couldn't actually, I'll take that back. I bought one welder I couldn't test, and that's because it was a big giant Ideal Arc 250, and the guy didn't even have enough power to run it. So I couldn't test that, but those things are indestructible. I would never buy a modern inverter welder without testing it. You're just asking for trouble. But bring some steel, some scrap you have, and if it's a stick welder, bring a couple rods with you. Don't rely on the stuff that the guy or girl that's selling it has. Just bring your own stuff so you can make sure it works. Now, I'm going to say this. If you have minimal welding experience and you're looking at buying a used welder to get into welding, obviously it might be a little bit, how do I put it, nerve-wracking to try and weld in front of someone when you yourself don't know how to weld. In that case, maybe you could talk with the person ahead of time, say, hey, I'm trying to learn to weld and I'm looking at buying your unit. Can you do a test weld for me? Now, odds are the person probably is better at welding than you are, so they could do that no problem. Like, I've sold welders to people that I recognize in a real hurry. They were a little too nervous to try and weld something in front of me, so I just showed them, like, look, this works. You don't have to worry about it. You're fine. Go home, practice, that sort of thing. So it would help. Or, you can always bring somebody that that can weld to make sure that it works. But generally speaking, modern welders, if they turn on, they generally weld. If they don't turn on or have an error displayed, they probably will have an issue, but it still pays to actually hands-on test it. For number 8, I want you to just look at these here. And no, I'm not bragging about anything. You notice how they're fairly clean? Like, there's some dust on it, okay, but they're fairly clean. Now, I don't have these in an industrial shop. If you're looking at buying a used welder and you go on Marketplace and someone's welder that they put up for sale looks like it has 5 pounds of grinding dust on it, which would you rather buy, that one or one of these that at least looks reasonably clean? Now, it also goes to show that I do enough welding that these are cleaner than they would be if I never cleaned them. At least once a week I blow these off, wipe the tops down, etc. to try and keep them looking decent. So when you see that they're filthy in a photo, you already can make one pretty safe assumption, and that's that they don't bother to clean the crap. And then the second assumption you can make is that why wouldn't you clean it before you took pictures of it? Because who wants to buy a filthy used car? Like, if you want to go on Marketplace and buy a car from someone, you show up and there's like cockroaches and cigarette butts all over it, is that something that you really want to pay top dollar for? Absolutely not, because you already know, well, if they don't take care of that, they probably don't take care of anything else. So if you're going to buy something used, look at the pictures closely, and if they didn't at least put the effort to clean it, to put it up for sale, then they probably didn't take care of that unit and beat it up a little bit, and the long-term reliability is probably going to be less. I mean, is that universal? Well, maybe not, but I don't know. When I put up stuff for sale, I clean it. So use that as an indication. Likewise, if you go and look at a welder, look around the person's shop. And I don't mean in a suspicious way like you're going to come back later and steal stuff, but look at how clean they keep things. See if the place is organized. All of those things are telltale signs that they take care of their stuff. So number 9, up there in that pile of junk is the original box for my firepower, and I actually have the original box, which you can't see, of my Rogue and the original box for the Dynasty somewhere. Actually, the Dynasty box is above that Firepower box. So the reason I bring this up is that if the person has all original manuals in the boxes, they probably take care of stuff and it's worth a little bit more. At least if they don't have those things, you can use it as a bargaining tool to try and lower the price. Okay, so it's something to think of. Generally speaking, I take care of my stuff. I have all the boxes, and you're basically almost buying a brand new piece of equipment. But most people are not like me. So, you know, for me, I'm not willing to bargain as much with people because I know what I have is worth it. Other people that don't take care of their crap know that nobody's going to pay anything. So there's probably more bargaining room. But just keep that in mind. And finally, number 10. Got my wallet out. If you're like me and you basically just got some bills in a dry wallet, you might want to do some negotiation when you buy a welder. If the person didn't really take that good a care of it and it's not in that great a shape, doesn't have the original manuals, maybe missing things like contact tips and I don't know, the feed rollers if it's a MIG machine, etc. You get the idea. You probably could offer less money. Now, I personally, I don't really negotiate. If I see something that I want and the price is too high, I don't even bother emailing the person to try and get a deal because I don't waste people's time and I don't waste my time. If I see something that I think is stupidly overpriced, I'm not even going to waste 1 minute because, you know, people don't like when, you know, hey, I want $2,000 for this. And it's like, well, dude, I'll give you $1,000. Like, I don't know, I'm not an a-hole and I just don't waste my time or other people's. So if there's something I want and the price is somewhere close, I generally just offer them that. And if it's too high, I don't buy it. And if it's really low and in bad shape, I don't buy it. So I think you get the picture of how I work as far as that's concerned. But if you're on a real tight budget and what you want is a common welder, like say you want a 140 amp MIG welder, like a Hobart Handler 140. There's so many of those on Marketplace all the time. If you email 10 people with them, someone will take less than all the others. So say you only got $400 in your wallet, it's not as dry as mine. You could probably get one for $300 if you emailed all 10 of those people that are selling them and say, hey, you know, I'm a poor college student and, you know, all I got is $400. Would that work for you? Someone would probably take it. Now, if you show up and you're 50 years old and you're driving a BMW, you might piss the person off and they'll leave you a bad review on Marketplace. So keep that in mind. But you get the picture is that, you know, if you're legitimately on a budget, I'm sure you can get a deal, you know, but be realistic. You're not getting a Dynasty 210 for $1,000, you know, and if you do, let me know. I'll buy one too. I'll even pay you $1,500 for it, you know, unless it's stolen. I don't screw around with that, which I guess that's the last thing I'll mention is the bonus is number 11. Don't buy stolen welders. Okay, there's plenty of them I see on Marketplace where people are marketing, you know, a Miller Bobcat generator welder for $1,500 when they're $5,000 new minimum. Like, you already know it's a scam. Don't waste your time with that. You'll probably get scammed on it anyways. But if something's too good to be true, it probably is. So if it's too good to be true, it's probably a scam. And if it's not a scam, it's probably stolen. And you know, maybe call me more ethical than the average bear, but honestly, I don't buy stuff that I even think is remotely stolen. And the reason behind that is I don't support stuff like that. Like, there's plenty of times in my life that I could have got a really good fall off the truck deal, and I just don't want anything to do with that. It doesn't help in the long run, so stay away from that. So let's go to a quick conclusion and end this. So in conclusion, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Just make sure it works. Make sure that you test it and that you do your due diligence and don't go buy a lemon. Another thing that I didn't mention but still is kind of true, it doesn't hurt to ask the person, hey, why are you selling this? I mean, in a lot of cases, people either need money or they upgraded, that sort of thing. So ask them, because that'll tell you a little bit. I mean, I wouldn't expect someone to be honest and say, hey, it welds like crap and you probably shouldn't buy it. I mean, people generally don't do that, but you get the picture on that. So ask the person why they're selling it. And it doesn't hurt as well to say, hey, you know, I'm on a budget. I'll buy the welder from you for that. Do you have any wire or consumables you could throw in, or even some steel or a welding table? You know, I'm trying to get started. Like, people, for the most part, people are pretty nice. And if you don't lowball the shit out of them on the initial purchase, you might get a couple extras. I know everyone that's ever bought a welder from me, I generally throw in some extras just to get them started. You know, I'm not too concerned about it. I made money off of the welder anyways, so for a hobby, it's like, whatever, I'll let the next guy pay a little bit less, get a quality welder, and go on with my life. But, you know, I'm a little different than most people, I guess. But with that said, if you got any other tips you can share with people, definitely share them in the comments. You know, we can all learn from it. And until next time, thanks for sticking around.